In this video, we're going to talk about the SWiSS method of design. This is something I came up with to help me get over the kind of creative block that I had. I'm not really a good artist. In fact, I'm a terrible artist. But and drawing, I can draw simple shapes, and that's really about it. And I had a really big mental block for the longest time about design. I would see all of these, beautifully like designed objects, and I think, oh, I can't make anything like that. But it turns out, as I studied the problem a little bit more, that really design is about simple elements and then building up those elements and connecting them in different ways. And the great thing about Fusion 360 is that we don't have to be able to draw perfectly straight lines or perfectly round circles to be able to create beautiful and functional objects. So this is sort of the method that I came up with to help me in my process. So we'll start out with simple shapes. Everything is made up of simple shapes. There's just a few simple shapes out there, and everything is built upon it. So there's the rectangle, there's the circle, the ellipse, and then the triangle. And those are all of the simple shapes. Those are all the building blocks of more complex designs, and putting them together in different ways is what makes all the variety of different objects that we have. And it's also really the fundamentals of drawing. I'm not a great artist by any means. I'm probably not even a good artist, but I'm a little bit better than I was when I started, just by practicing and looking for these simple shapes. So 3D forms, because we are creating things to be 3D printed, they're all made up of these simple shapes just put together in different ways. So a cube is maybe the most straightforward example of that. That's just squares or rectangles put together. I guess it's not a cube if it's rectangles, but a box maybe. And you can see here, it's just a matter of lining things up correctly. A cylinder is really just an ellipse and a couple of lines. It's two ellipses. It's just the second ellipse down here. We don't kind of see the back part of it there. We only see the front, but that's kind of what gives it that illusion of 3 dimensions. A sphere is just a lot of circles stacked on top of each other of different diameter. And then a cone is a circle and 2 lines, or a circle and a triangle, if you want to think about it in that way. So it's that simple, and then it's putting those things together to make more complex things. So what you want to do is really look at complex shapes and see how do they break down into simpler ones. So a phone case, really, it's just a rectangle in 2 dimensions, and then we can stretch that out into sort of a box shape when we add our 3rd dimension. But our basic form is a rectangle, and that's what we're going to start with. And Fusion 360, it's really, really simple to take these simple shapes and turn them into 3-dimensional objects, and then make modifications of them to get forms that are less boxy. A coffee mug, you can see, is just a couple of shapes here. There's an ellipse at the top, so we've got a cylinder, so it's an ellipse plus a rectangle, and then another ellipse there for the handle. And then a bowl is really just a sphere, and just with the top part taken away. And I know you might be thinking, well, that's a ceramic bowl, does that really count? Well, we could print bowls in plastic, of course, but it's really interesting, and we'll talk about it more later on. But Shapeways actually lets you take an STL file, and you can set it to them, and they can print you something in ceramic. I think what they do is really print a mold, and then they cast with ceramic from your mold. But still, you can actually, not directly, but you can indirectly 3D print ceramic objects. And you can also print, because of that, you can print ceramic objects that maybe you wouldn't be able to to create either on a wheel or by hand. They just wouldn't stand up to the firing process very well, I think. Okay, and then a lamp you can see is just it's a cone or a triangle with the top cut off, and then this base is more of a cone or a triangle here. Okay, so how do we use these concepts? So you're going to see on my next slide that I am a terrible artist. I'm really just, I have the most basic of art skills and of drawing skills, but that's okay. I can still design things in Fusion 360 that end up being, I think, pretty nice looking, and we can do things with it that might be a little bit tough to do in other media besides 3D printing. So here is my concept sketch for a mug, a coffee mug. And as you can see, it is very, very basic. It's, you know, my ellipse here at the top, it's not, you know, perfectly even. My line here at the bottom for my bottom ellipse is a little bit rough too. But what I wanted to do was kind of create a mug that wasn't perfectly vertical, but it was kind of tapered a little bit, with a handle that was maybe a little bit flat on top, instead of being perfectly round. And then here I wanted to, rather than just paint on letters for these words, I wanted to put hashtag 3D printed. I actually want to emboss them into the actual material of the mug itself. So let's see how this turned out in the rendering. You can see here it looks pretty good, right? I can't draw very straight lines or very even ellipses, but I know what shapes are going into my design, and because of that, Fusion 360 is able to create those straight and perfectly curved lines for me. As long as I can tell it, here's what I need, it can do the straight, making the line straight and even. So you can see the final design turned out a little bit differently than my, you know, preliminary sketch, but you can still see the, you know, the elements there. It's basically an ellipse at the top here, although as we'll see when we're drawing this, that's really just a circle. It's just kind of our perspective. It makes it look like an ellipse. And then here's the handle here with a little kind of flat spot for my thumb on top. And then I have hashtag 3D printed, and that's actually kind of into the surface of the cup itself. So if I can do it, you can do it too. It sometimes, I think, is so intimidating at first, especially when you're a part of, you know, some of the Facebook groups on 3D printing. You see all these amazing designs that people put up. You see things on Thingiverse that you're just like, how did somebody come up with those designs? And it's just very overwhelming sometimes, especially if, like me, you're not a very good artist. And it's easy to think like, oh, I have these ideas, but actually getting them on paper and I can't draw them the way that I'd like them to look. It doesn't really matter. As long as you can see what the basic elements are of your design, you can create that rough shape in Fusion 360, or you can just put that rough shape on paper rather, and then translate that into Fusion 360. And then from there, the computer will really help you with making lines straight and making curves nice and even so that you can make something that looks good. So really what you have to do is just start practicing. Look at the shapes around you and look at what the simple shapes are within those more complex shapes. I still like to start on paper. I know that some people like to just go straight to the computer, but I still like to make designs on paper first. For me, it's just kind of a low investment thing. Even if it's just like a piece of printer paper and a pencil, I'll just kind of put a little idea down. And I know it doesn't look beautiful. It doesn't look amazing. It's not something I'm going to show somebody and they'll be like, wow, that's amazing. But I know that the building blocks of my final design will come from there. And that, with a little help from Fusion 360, I will have things at some point that people will say, wow, you made that yourself. That's pretty neat. And the other thing too is that it's faster. If you've sort of planned out ahead how you want your design to look and what the building blocks are, you won't have to spend so much time in Fusion 360 doing trial and error to get things to work. Okay, so in the next video, we're going to talk about just an overview of the interface of Fusion 360. And then after that, we're going to get into our first project, and I'll show you how I made that coffee mug.